Someone sent me a message saying that they want to get to know more about me, and I think um, maybe a lot of shit will be able to be demystified if people actually understand the past. Now, I'm not trying to say any of this is like, look how bad my life was and pity, pity, pity me, but specific events happened when I was little that have really shaped the way that I view and interpret events in the world. And and I guess in sharing little stories, you might be able to just build a bigger picture. So the first story, which I don't even remember, but through discussions with my psych, is where my attachment. So basically, a lot of my mental health issues are to do with attachment because didn't I didn't bond with my primary caregiver. I didn't really have one. And there are a number of reasons for that. So primary caregiver is usually the mother, but sometimes that's not always the case. So that's why, but it is like, for lack of a better term, like a single primary parental or like, yeah, caregiver to an infant that it bonds with because it needs that person for survival. And I don't know, there's been a lot of different things. I've tried to talk to kind of mum about it. So one big area where like infants bond with their mother, which is usually their primary caregiver, is obviously through like breastfeeding. And that connection, and I'm sure anyone who is a mother might be able to relate or make a comment on that. Now, I think it's a combination of kind of weird Japanese culture. Like, I don't think breastfeeding was really done. That's kind of the impression that I was given, because I remember mum saying that when my sister was born at St Margaret's Hospital in Sydney, basically as soon as Erica was crying, the nurse just like slapped my sister on my mum's tit, and she was like, whoa, what the fuck is this? So because she told me that story, I've always been led to believe that I was actually never breastfed. And not only was I, mum said she tried, but she actually had a lot of difficulty expressing milk, and that was actually quite a big now that was actually quite a big cause for angst for her, and she probably had postpartum depression because of it. That was never treated. She certainly felt like a failure of a mother. So I don't know. That's from day zero. And then when I was about 11 months old, there was an incident at home. So just a bit of context. I'm 11 months old. We being me, mum and dad, have kind of just been living in Australia for about 6 months. Mum and I moved here 6 months before that. She arrived to find out that she was pregnant with my sister. And so she wasn't working. She was trying to look after me, manage her pregnancy. Dad was working 2 jobs. And so this incident happened at the very start of 1990, so almost 30 years ago. Anyway, so we weren't always the richest family, and things were tough. So my grandparents used to send over, I think, just like $100 or $200 cash to my mum, just so that she had a little bit of pocket money to play with, to help make things a little bit easier. And one night, my dad came home late. So, bit of context as well, I guess. My dad in Australia is a Japanese language teacher at high school, or was. he was also in the Army Reserves, and he would also pull beers after school. So he was working 3 jobs to support us. And I think if he'd had a particularly long day or a particularly hard day, he would stick around after his shift had finished, or go to the RSL or go somewhere else and have a few beers with the boys and have a slap on the pokies. And anyway, where this story starts is that he came home late and started demanding the cash that my grandparents were sending my mum off her, so that he can win back everything that he just lost. And she refused to do it. I don't know if there was a physical altercation, but I know that he ended up taking it and storming out of the house. And Mum ran after him. And so I was left in the house alone. I don't know if I was awake. I don't know if I slept through it all or if I was screaming the whole time. I was the kind of baby that needed to be held all the time. I wouldn't sleep unless I was held. I was really, really fucking demanding, apparently. So I imagine that I probably would have been quite distressed and screaming. And anyway, so Dad left with the money and Mum went running after him. While really heavily pregnant. She said that her stomach started to hurt and she kept pushing through it. And she didn't even make it to the end of the block before she collapsed because the pain in her abdomen was too much. And she had to go to hospital, and she was in hospital for a month. And because my mum was away in hospital, my dad was working, I got sent to stay with my grandmother down in Maria. So there's photos from my first birthday where it's just me, my nan, my great grandmother and my dad. Not like you need like a lot of people around, but I didn't have my mum, and so people find it really weird that I've always been a daddy's girl, but maybe like these are all parts of the different reasons why, but I've been left alone. And a lot of shit things have happened when I've been left alone. And I think some of the shit things wouldn't happen so often, or I was protected from them when my sister came along. Because I don't feel safe unless she's around. I don't feel like I can survive whatever life throws at me unless she's around. And that's what part of having to learn all of this is about too. I've got to learn that I can survive on my own. But anyway, that's one story for you. Let's just leave it at that. I'll tell you another one later.